Hey everyone, we're back, and I am here with Uri Goldshtein, who is the founder of the Guild software. He's going to go into a deep dive with GraphQL Server, the GraphQL Yoga 2.0. Uri, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and excited about all the other speakers as well. So far has been amazing.
Excellent. I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. So hi everyone. Let me just share my screen just a second. Oh, just a second. I think it should. Oh, sorry. Just a second. I thought this was supposed to be there. Give me just a second, and we'll fix it.
Yeah, no worries. There's like a little delay, and always with a new tool. And I know that with this tool, there's a little delay to get the screen sharing going. So.
Okay, I'll be back in 1 second. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we're going to wait for Uri to reconnect here. I think he has to accept some permissions in his on his computer. We've all been there, right? So what else do I want to say? I want to say that we really want to get some questions. Let's make this an interactive conversation. So get those questions up in the Q&A side of your chat there. We'll get them out there. We'll ask those questions. I see Uri's right back. That was quick, Uri.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Let me start. Share my screen again. I hope that this time this will be okay. Share my screen. Okay. Doesn't matter how many times you're doing it, you always fail. You can see my screen now, right?
He's starting now. You're good to go. Take it away, Uri.
Okay. Thank you very much. So again, thanks everyone for having me and thanks for listening. Today, I'm going to talk about something very, very exciting that we've been working on for years. It's an accumulation of a lot of things we've been doing it for many years, and we basically officially announced it last week, which is GraphQL Yoga 2.0. And why we believe in the Guild, this is the best way for you today to write, to use and to write your GraphQL server in. So a bit about us and the Guild. We're the largest open source group in the GraphQL ecosystem today. We develop a lot of libraries that we're probably using already. If you're using GraphQL, some that I can mention very briefly is the GraphQL code generator that is mentioned a lot, GraphQL tools, GraphQL mesh, which lets you take basically any source, even if it's not GraphQL, automatically convert it into GraphQL and then expose it as a single gateway. GraphQL inspector that helps you prevent breaking changes, and many, many others. And the idea of all the tools that we are building is that it's all basically, those are individual tools that you can use individually. You can adopt them gradually. Each library is doing one small thing very, very well. But together they're under basically one big vision of how all those things can connect together and act as a full platform. Some libraries that I didn't mention before was GraphQL config, GraphQL scalars, GraphQL shield to handle authentication, and all kinds of things like that. And just like the way we write open source and how we develop our individual libraries, the Guild is also operating in the same way. All the libraries are under individuals, and we were basically a group of individuals. So if something will happen to the Guild, if the company is not the important piece here, the people are. And that's how we operate, that's how we develop, because the most important thing for us is sustainable open source. We want to make sure that that open source and specific libraries stay forever. So we have all kinds of different philosophies, and you can read more about it in our website, of how we make sure and how we structure the Guild. So every library that you see from the Guild is there for many, many years. Some of them are 5 or 6 years already, and are being maintained daily, which is something that we ourselves find surprisingly rare. So that's a bit about us and about the Guild. Now, today I want to basically talk about the server ecosystem. So for us, we didn't want to write a GraphQL server. we just saw that there's gaps in the ecosystem, and we gradually fitted them with like all the libraries that I've shown before. But as things progressed, as things progressed, we saw that like we filled up more and more things, and the existing parts of the ecosystem weren't enough for us. And gradually, we came to basically develop more and more of these things because it was necessary. We really wished it wasn't necessary. So when we came to a couple of, I guess, a year or a year and a half ago, we were in a position where we asked ourselves, what do we actually want from a GraphQL server? What exists in the ecosystem, and how can we help? So let's talk about this question for a second. So first of all, what you see here is basically the core implementation of GraphQL JS. This is when we all use GraphQL, that's the core thing that actually GraphQL JS itself gives us. Like it's basically, it validates, it does validation, parsing, and execution. I won't dive too deep into it, but I'll explain in a second why that is important. Now, so going back to the question, what we want from the GraphQL server and what doesn't GraphQL JS provides us with, right? Like, because we have GraphQL JS, what is the extra thing that we want that GraphQL JS doesn't provide us? So first of all, schema creation. All of us have in the ecosystem all kinds of preference, right? Like some wants to do SDL first using GraphQL tools. And if you want like type safety, you can use the CodeGen for it. Some uses code first libraries like Photos, like Nexus, Type GraphQL, all kinds of things like that. So when we write a server, we want that there. Also, we need to handle the communication itself, right? It's a server, so we need to handle HTTP, maybe WebSockets, maybe you want to deploy it in all kinds of environments. Also, when we run a server, we need to take care of a lot of things like caching and performance, tracing and monitoring of our servers, logging. We want to take care of security and auth, and also error handling, which all are subjects for talks by themselves. And in many conferences, people are talking about each one of these things a lot. And also, we want our server ecosystem to basically have a flourishing ecosystem, right? We don't want just one entity to build everything, and basically all the community is being blocked from changing it, affecting it, and basically evolving it. So what you're going to see here is basically our take on the current GraphQL server ecosystem today. This is an opinion, and we would love to like discuss and fight and debate over everything we're saying here. But when we set out to see and work with our clients and the work we're doing daily with GraphQL, we saw that the current frameworks are, most of them or even all of them, were too opinionated in some cases, and in many cases poorly maintained. So even frameworks that are very popular, you saw hundreds of issues. You saw like outdated dependencies, like many things that if you look deep into the library, you see it's a bit problematic to rely and build your GraphQL server upon. The other thing is that all these servers were very opinionated. Like they told you how to do things that, in one hand, they wanted to do everything for you. On the other hand, they were very not flexible about, let's say, if you want to write SDL or code, and also how you want to handle your HTTP. Like most of them are basically wrapping the entire request pipeline, which for you as a server developer makes it hard for you to integrate with many of the tools that you want to use, whatever like HTTP server you're using. Maybe you're deploying in another environment completely that uses JavaScript, that supports JavaScript, like Cloudflare Workers or Dino, and those frameworks couldn't support that. And also the existing frameworks, like they allow you to maybe do some customizations, but they were very basic and weren't enough for us. And we write, GraphQL servers for very large clients, and they get into, they get to be very complex, and also they need to handle like crazy amount of traffic in a very performant way, and it just wasn't enough for us. Like all of the things, by the way, that we do in the guild started from PRs for other libraries. So we never want to maintain anything, but the ecosystem kind of forces us to. And some of the frameworks also kind of like, there's a reason why they do all of that. They want to basically, at the end of the day, sell you a product. They want to sell you something. So, so they want to direct you. They want to make it very hard at the end of the day to use other things, which is not the philosophy that we needed or we wanted. I mean, it's okay to do it, but for us, we wanted an alternative. So we went down to back to the drawing board, and we asked ourselves, what you see here, by the way, is the first sketch that Dotan from the guild did when we started talking about it. So we saw what GraphQL JS gives us, which is the parse, validation, execution, and subscribe functions. So that GraphQL JS takes care of for us. So that's great. But then we thought, what if we hook before and after each of those? And we can provide a plugin system where everyone can write their own plugins and manipulate each stage of it. And then we're going to basically expose the same signature. So this server, this thing you could basically completely customize everything and every phase in GraphQL while still exposing to the user or to the developer the same way of developing the GraphQL server. So, most of the work that you do in the day-to-day won't be affected by it, but let's say your infrastructure teams could introduce caching, could introduce error masking and all kind of really cool abilities without affecting the majority of the developers. And we wanted also to make the way you write your GraphQL schema basically completely agnostic, right? Like it doesn't matter for us if you write it in Nexus or in GraphQL tools or in both of them together. And at the end of the day, all of this also, which is something that I think is very important, is completely separate from how you handle HTTP. Somehow we got to get one giant server that does everything for us. But why? I mean, if you look at what GraphQL is doing, it has nothing it shouldn't affect and it shouldn't change how you use your favorite tools like Festify or Express or or however else you want to do to handle HTTP. So all of this is completely separate. So we took all of this and we built something and released it over a year ago, something that's called Envelop. Envelop is a library in a plugin system that basically hooks into GraphQL. And we think, since it was created, this is basically de facto GraphQL plugin tool that helps you basically hook into everything in GraphQL JS and manipulate it. So I'm going to talk a bit about Envelop and then how we build Yoga around Envelop. So Envelop basically just introducing the GraphQL plugin system, something we didn't have before. We took a lot of things that were hard, like I said before, like caching, error masking, and all kinds of things like that, that there's a whole conference talks about them, and made it super easy just with the power of plugins. So you can see here, the basics of using Envelop, we just introduced here 4 lines of code that basically created an extremely performant server for us. We get the schema from wherever, we cache the parser and we cache the validation phase, and then we also introduce GraphQL JIT that helps us cache and optimize the execution itself. So just by 4 lines of code, we took a regular GraphQL server, and made it super performant. But on the plugin side of the people that want to dig in and write their own plugins, the hook system is very powerful. You can basically change anything inside GraphQL that you couldn't do before. And just from giving the community about over a year ago that ability, we introduced a full plugin hub. It's a whole marketplace and ecosystem of many, many plugins. All of them are free and open source. You can use today, caching, response caching plugins, which is extremely performant. It's extremely powerful, and you can change and manipulate everything there. You can use tracing. You can introduce plugins for tracing, for Prometheus, Datadog, New Relic, Sentry, OpenTelemetry, Apollo tracing. This thing can integrate with any of the Apollo ecosystem. And also many other things around security, like rate limit, depth limit, and integration with Auth0, and basically almost everything that used to be hard in GraphQL and like was the main work once you finish building your basic server, now it's not anymore like a huge tutorial or like very impressive conference talk that you need to go through and read about. Now you can just go and install a plugin to do that. And you can still choose whatever you want along the way while still reusing the plugins across the whole ecosystem. So people that are using Nexus and people that are using GraphQL tools can share the same plugins. So that's the second point that is very important that we got from it. So again, it doesn't matter, all these things, and it doesn't matter also like what HTTP server you're using, right? Like if you're using Express or Fastify, if you deploy to AWS Lambda, if you use Next.js routes, and if you're going to deploy this thing, which is something that we do a lot into CloudTrail workers, or Dino. So this thing supports all of these environments. And not only that it supports it, also you could reuse the things in the plugin system across all of those environments, no matter where you deploy. The other thing is that that I want to talk about is that Envelop, since we introduced it, became kind of like the framework for frameworks. Because it's a very powerful tool, it became the basis of many other libraries. And just this week, actually, Redwood.js introduced 1.0. Redwood.js, a couple of months ago, basically migrated from build. It's a full stack framework, very interesting. If you haven't heard about it, I think you should check it out. And it's a full stack framework, and they used to build it in the early days on top of Apollo server. And when we introduced Envelop, they completely migrated it to Envelop. And pretty recently, they also migrated from using Envelop to use GraphQL Yoga that I'm going to talk about it now. So not only that other people in the ecosystem created high-level frameworks using Envelop since we released it, but also ourselves, we looked at like the ecosystem and we saw that maybe we don't have to like choose between power and ease of use. And luckily we talked with, we have a really good connection with Prisma, and Prisma had GraphQL Yoga, which was one of the most loved and powerful and popular GraphQL servers. And for many years, because Prisma moved to another areas, it wasn't maintained. And it was a shame because it was a very good tool and with really big community. But they were very gracious and they decided to hand it over to us. And like we did with many other libraries, because when we develop open source, we're there for the long term, we also decided to take GraphQL Yoga and basically rebuild it from scratch and support it so you could use, you could have a full batteries included server that you can rely on for years. So this is GraphQL Yoga. We introduced it we use it for, I think, a couple of good months in production, but we introduced it to the public as an official 2.0 last week. And the idea here is that GraphQL Yoga gives you all the power that I discussed before, but with the ease of use. It's the easiest server to use today. So it's extremely easy to start, but it's extremely flexible and you can customize everything. So here you can see just the basic hello world. You can see, by the way, that you are importing your server from GraphQL Yoga/Node. That's because Yoga, the core of it, is basically platform agnostic. So, if what you do here is you use just GraphQL HTTP, adhere to the W3C standard. So you have a full node server running out of the box, and it's extremely easy. And also, and you can use it basically with any schema builder. What you can see here is you can get your schema, write it in Photos, which is if you use code first, by the way, we highly recommend that library. But also with Nexus, you can see an example here, and with GQTX. So basically, whatever way you want to build your schema, you can use it with GraphQL Yoga. But also, because we build Yoga, the core of Yoga is basically very modern and also adhere to all the standards. So here, for example, the core of GraphQL Yoga is using the file upload spec. So you don't need, when you want to introduce the file uploads and handle file uploads with GraphQL Yoga, you don't need to install an extra library. It just works. And I'll talk later more about why this adherence to the newest specification helps us in other ways. But also here you can see yoga is extremely easy to start, but with 3 lines of code, you can completely customize it using the Envelop plugin system. So what you see here is a server that is secure because we use the depth limit plugin. It's extremely fast because we use the response cache plugin. If you saw Max talks before about explaining caching and how it works and everything, this is all introduced here. And you can use Sentry to basically like log in all the unexpected errors in production. And all you needed to do is to do that, and it's all free and open source. And what you see here also is like that. For example, error handling is like a whole thing about in GraphQL. You get like blogs and opinions and talks about it. We made it extremely easy with GraphQL Yoga to first of all make sure that your errors are not leaking, and also that if you want to send good errors to the user, you can. So we just wrote a blog post about it. You can check it out on our website. I highly recommend that. But also the thing is, because inside inside GraphQL Yoga, we adhere to the W3C spec. First of all, GraphQL Yoga itself, you don't need to introduce any new server for it. But if you want to use Express with it, if you want to use Fastify with it, that's not a problem at all. That's very, very easy to do. So you can use all the things that you're using today, all the tools that you're using today with GraphQL Yoga. But also it means that you could basically deploy Yoga anywhere. So here you can see Yoga being used as a Next.js routes, API routes. So if you want to install Yoga as a Next.js route, here what you see is basically how you run Yoga in Cloudflare workers, which is extremely simple. Why? Because Cloudflare workers adhere to the spec in Yoga as well. So you basically don't need to do anything. It just works. Here you can see Yoga works with Dino. So those are really fascinating things, but they're also extremely easy with Yoga. That's why I think it's important for you to use a modern framework that is also highly maintained for the long term, because there will always be new platforms. There will always be new spec changes, and you want to have a server that you could rely on, and it's also extremely modern and performant. Here you can see that Klarna actually moved to use also the plugin ecosystem of Envelop, and later on GraphQL Yoga. They're extremely happy with it. Yeah, so I don't think I have a lot more time, but basically Envelop itself, to summarize, Envelop itself basically takes a lot of stuff that were hard before, makes it extremely easy with the plugin system. All the plugins that you can create to share across your company or share across the ecosystem, everyone can share it. It's not based on your choices. No matter where you deploy, you can reuse all those plugins. There's already many frameworks that are using it. And also, by the way, it gives you the option to, I wrote here Babel for GraphQL. It gives you the option to basically use features that are not in the official spec yet, like defer and stream, one-off directives, kind of like what all of us did with Babel. We wanted to use new features in JavaScript, even if the browser didn't support it. So GraphQL Yoga and Envelop do the same for us. And then we took all of that and we wrapped it in with GraphQL Yoga. Basically, we wrote GraphQL Yoga release 2.0, which on top of Envelop gave us a modern GraphQL server, a lot of power, but extreme ease of use. And like anything from the guild, you can rely that this thing is going to be there for the long term. So the best way to go and check it out is to go to graphqlyoga.com, or to, yeah, that's just the best place to try. And also, you can check out the GraphQL WTF videos. There's tons of videos there in many subjects around GraphQL and also around GraphQL Yoga. That's it for me. I would love to hear questions and opinions and bad things to say about us. Thank you very much.
Wow, Uri, that was awesome. Thank you so much. We do have just a couple of questions from the group. The first one is Yoga Server available as Docker image or a Helm charts?
Yeah, it could easily do that. Like if we have it internally, but if you want us to expose something public, like just open an issue on the repo and everything. It's just a regular node app, so it's easy to do.
Sure, so it'd be easy to wrap up in a Docker image. That question was from Thomas Zaba. We have another question from Mikhail, which is, which version of the subscription WebSocket protocol is being used in Yoga? There seems to be a lack of a standard subscription protocol.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things we wanted to do, and one of the reasons that, by the way, the original library of GraphQL subscriptions and the subscription and the original, basically the two libraries, also the WebSocket library that were created under Apollo, were created by me when I was still working at Apollo. But the thing is, they didn't really change ever since then, and that's kind of like what we see in the ecosystem many times. Ever since then, there's the new GraphQL WS library that also created a spec compliant spec for WebSockets. Here, you don't need anymore with GraphQL Yoga. You don't. First of all, you don't need anymore a separate GraphQL subscription library. GraphQL Yoga supports subscriptions out of the box, but it's not that what the spec. Actually, I think what the person that asked the question is asking is not about the GraphQL subscription spec, is because that's being done by GraphQL JS internally, is about the transport. GraphQL Yoga uses by default the SSE transport, which has a lot of benefits because it's over WebSocket. It's like it's easier to set up. There's more gateways that supports it, and it's much easier in many different ways. But you can still use GraphQL WS, which is the modern one. And if you want to use actually the old protocol, you can. You can actually, even if you want to use the old protocol, I think there's actually even a recipe on the GraphQL WS, like the new protocols library. There's a recipe on how that supports also the old protocol. So yeah, so that's actually a great subject that I didn't mention, but using subscriptions with GraphQL Yoga is way easier than anything other outside there, out there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is cool. Obviously, your talk is really making people think, because we got more questions coming up. We have, I'm probably not going to pronounce this right, but I think Zima, who's asking, can we do something similar with what we do with Apollo Federation and implement a microservice architecture?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my personal opinion, in our opinion, GraphQL Yoga is actually the best server for you to run both the federation gateway and the subgraphs. So GraphQL Yoga takes the schema from any source, and we have a lot of clients that use Apollo Federation, and there, what they could use, like our philosophy is that you don't need to. We don't mind what ecosystem you're part of. If you're in the GraphQL ecosystem or the Apollo ecosystem, that's okay. If you choose to use the Apollo ecosystem, that's fine. What you could do is that in all of our tools individually integrate with all the other tools. So you could use Apollo Studio with GraphQL Yoga. You can run GraphQL Yoga as a subgraph. You can run GraphQL Yoga as your main gateway of the other subgraphs. And of course, just to mention, I know people know that, but we also are the ones that took over and are maintaining the new up-to-date schema stitching, which also can itself, this is a different library and a different protocol, but also can basically manage and orchestrate federation subgraphs. So yeah, the short answer is yes to all the different combinations you want. And there's also good reasons why you would want to use GraphQL Yoga with federation, because then you get all the power of federation, but with all the Envelop plugins, for example, like caching and all those things. So yeah.
Awesome, Uri. This is great. I think we're just out of time, which is too bad. I just found 2 more questions in the event Q&A. So we're gonna get you those questions. We're gonna get those answers, and we get them posted, and we're gonna let these people know the responses. Thank you so much, Uri. That was a really cool talk. I'm really excited to check out Yoga and Envelop. This is so cool. I love working with GraphQL. Thanks, Uri. Have a great day, and I hope to see you again soon. Huh?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and we'd love all the feedback that we could get. Thanks for everyone for listening.
Take care.